The kitchen faucet has been leaking for 3 years. Your mother presses a folded dish towel against its base every night before bed, like she's tucking in something wounded. You are 11 years old, and you don't know what a mortgage is, but you know this. The landlord doesn't fix things, your mother fixes things, and some things never get fully fixed. They just get managed. She works the 6 a.m. shift at the hospital and the 5 p.m. shift at the call center. Somewhere in between, she sits at the table with a calculator that makes a sound like a tiny machine gun every time she hits the plus sign. You will remember that sound for the rest of your life. The tapping, the silence after the tapping, the way she'd close her eyes and press both thumbs against her temples and say quietly, to no one, okay, 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 like she was trying to convince the numbers to cooperate. She made $41,000 a year combined. You know this now? You didn't know it then? What you knew then was that she bought the store brand cereal, and she'd already eaten when you got home. Always every night, which meant she hadn't eaten at all. Your name is on every permission slip she ever signed. Her name is on nothing. No deed, no title, no brokerage account, no retirement plan. The call center didn't offer one. The hospital had a 403B she couldn't afford to contribute to because every loose dollar went to keeping you in the school district with the better test scores. She drove 11 extra minutes each way for that school. The gas alone cost her roughly $80 a month. She never counted publicly. You counted it later. You counted everything later. There's a boy in your freshman dorm named Ellis. His parents gave him a car and a credit card with a $4,000 limit and a brokerage account seeded with $10,000 on his 18th birthday. You don't hate Ellis. You sit next to him in Econ 101, and he's the one who says the sentence that detonates something in you. He says, "My dad set up a Roth IRA for me when I was 16. He put in like $6,000 a year from my summer job earnings. It's already at 30-something thousand. He says it the way people say they had chicken for lunch. You go back to your dorm room and you open a browser tab and you don't close it for 4 hours. That night, you learn what a Roth IRA is, a retirement account you fund with after-tax dollars, so the money grows tax-free and comes out tax-free after 59 and a half. You learn that the annual contribution limit in that year is $6,500. You learn that compound interest at a historical S&P 500 average of roughly 10% annually will turn $6,500 a year into over $1 million in 30 years. You're 19. You don't have $6,500. You have a meal plan and a work-study job shelving books for $9.40 an hour. But the math has entered your body like a second pulse, and it doesn't leave. You start a business. It's not dramatic. You buy broken laptops from university surplus sales for $15 to $40 each, repair them, a skill you taught yourself because your mother couldn't afford to replace your own laptop when the screen cracked sophomore year of high school, and resell them online for $150 to $300. Your first month you make $411 in profit. Your mother asks how school is. You say fine. You don't tell her about the laptops. You don't know why yet, but something in you wants the telling to mean something. Later, when the number is bigger. By the end of freshman year, you've netted just over $9,000. You open a Roth IRA with Fidelity, contribute $6,500, and put the rest in a high-yield savings account, earning north of 4%. Sophomore year, you scale. You start buying from 3 universities, hire a roommate to help with repairs, and net $22,000. You file a Schedule C. You pay self-employment tax, 15.3% on net earnings, Social Security, and Medicare, combined. And it stings, but you pay it. Because your mother taught you one thing about money without ever calling it a lesson. You pay what you owe. You don't negotiate with what's required. She calls you on a Tuesday. It's not about anything. She just says, "I miss your face." In the background, you can hear the faucet. Junior year, the business clears $68,000 in revenue after expenses. You're sleeping 4 hours a night. Your grades are a 3.1 and falling. Here is where you make the decision that a reasonable person would question. You turn down a summer internship at a consulting firm that pays $7,200 for 10 weeks. An internship that would have put a name on your resume that opens doors for decades. You turn it down to scale the business. The opportunity cost is invisible the day you decide. It becomes visible later. Ellis takes the internship. Ellis networks. Ellis gets a return offer. Ellis, by 26, will be making $142,000 base with a 4.6% 401k match. You don't know this yet. Senior year, the business nets $117,000. You have not told your mother. You have a Roth IRA with $89,000 in it, invested entirely in a total stock market index fund. You have a taxable brokerage account with another $41,000. You have a business checking account with working capital. You are 22 years old, and you are worth more than your mother has earned in any 2 consecutive years of her life combined. And the shame of that fact is so specific, you can feel it in your molars. She comes to your graduation. She wears a dress you've never seen, and later you realize she bought it at Goodwill the week before and took the tag off carefully so it wouldn't rip. She holds your face in both hands and says, "My baby did it." Her hands are rough. They've been rough since you were 8. You don't say anything because if you open your mouth, you will tell her everything, and you're not ready. 3 years out of college, you are 25. The business has expanded into refurbished electronics wholesale. You have 2 full-time employees. Annual revenue has crossed $400,000. Your Roth IRA sits at $151,000. You've maxed it every single year, and the market has cooperated. You have a SEP-IRA now, a retirement vehicle for self-employed individuals. You're contributing 25% of your net self-employment income up to the annual limit. You are learning about tax strategy the way your mother learned about surviving by necessity in real time with no safety net. You discover that business expenses reduce your adjusted gross income, that a home office deduction exists, that the qualified business income deduction under Section 199A can shave up to 20% off your taxable business income. Every dollar you save in taxes is a dollar that compounds. You begin to understand something they don't teach in Econ 101. Wealth isn't built in the moments of earning. It's built in the moments of keeping. Ellis buys a condo. You see it on Instagram. Granite countertops. A kitchen island. You're still in a 1-bedroom apartment with a mattress on the floor because you funnel 80% of your after-tax income back into the business and into investments. Some nights you sit on that mattress and eat cereal from the box and wonder if you're broken or if you're building something. The answer is yes. You are 27 when the account crosses $1 million. Total. Across all accounts. Roth, SEP-IRA, taxable brokerage, business equity, cash. It's not liquid, it's not spendable, but the number is there. 7 digits. You stare at it on the Fidelity app for 11 minutes. You refresh it once. Not because you think it'll change, but because you want to watch it appear again. $1,014,000. Your mother made $41,000 that year. You start planning. The gift tax exclusion for 2026 is $19,000 per recipient. Anything above that counts against your lifetime exemption of $15 million. You're nowhere near that ceiling, but you learn it anyway. Because the architecture of generosity has rules, and you intend to know every one of them. You consult a CPA. You consult an estate attorney. You learn that buying a home and titling it in your mother's name is a gift. You learn that paying someone's expenses directly, medical bills, educational costs, can qualify for unlimited exclusions if paid directly to the institution, but a house doesn't fit that carve-out. You learn about trusts. You learn about the step-up in basis at death and how it interacts with property transferred during life versus at death. You choose to give it now, not later, not at death, now, because your mother is 59 years old and she's still pressing a dish towel against a leaking faucet in a rental she's lived in for 14 years, and you refuse to let tax optimization become the reason she waits another year to rest. Her birthday is in March. You find a house in her zip code, 3 bedrooms, a porch, a backyard with a magnolia tree she will later talk about as if it were a person. The median home price nationally is around $400,000. You pay $362,000 in cash. No mortgage, no lien. You title it in her name. You furnish the kitchen. You fix the faucet. You drive her there on her birthday. She thinks you're going to brunch. You hand her an envelope. She says, "You didn't have to get me a card, baby." Inside is the deed. Inside is a letter you wrote at 3 a.m., a letter in which you formally resign her from working, though of course you cannot actually do that. What it really says is, you don't have to anymore. Inside is a printed bank statement showing an account in her name containing $240,000, enough to cover property taxes, insurance, utilities, and living expenses for over a decade at her current spending level, which you calculated because you've been quietly studying her spending level for 3 years. She doesn't collapse. That's not what happens. What happens is slower. She reads the deed, and she looks at you, and she looks at the house, and she reads the deed again. She mouths the address. She walks to the front door and puts her hand on it, and stands there. Just stands there. You watch her shoulders start to shake from behind. You think about every night she sat at that table with the calculator, every meal she skipped, every Sunday she sold something small and gold at the pawn shop on Reyes Street, and you realize you don't actually know how many of those Sundays there were. You never asked. There are things between you and your mother that you will never have the full math on, and that is its own kind of debt, unpayable, accruing in a currency that has no name. She turns around. Her face is wet. She says, "How?" One word. That's all she says for a long time. Ellis, meanwhile, has a beautiful condo and a 401k with $312,000 and a girlfriend who posts their vacations and a career trajectory that looks, from the outside, like the thing you were supposed to want. You don't begrudge him any of it. But you notice this. When you tell Ellis what you did, he goes quiet for a second, then says, "That's incredible, man." The way he says it, there's something underneath. Not jealousy, something closer to recognition. Like he suddenly understood that there was a game inside the game he hadn't known he was playing. Your mother moves in on a Saturday. She arranges the kitchen slowly. She puts a kettle on the stove and stands by the window and watches the magnolia tree. Her phone rings, and she doesn't answer it. For the first time in your memory, she doesn't answer it. You sit on the porch and you listen to the house settle around her. This house with her name on it. This house with no leak, no landlord, no calculator on the table. You want to say something. You planned a sentence. You practiced it in the car, but you don't say it. Because when you look through the window and see her standing there, alone, one hand on the counter, steam rising from the kettle, doing nothing, absolutely nothing, just standing in a house that belongs to her, you understand that this moment isn't yours. You built it. You funded it. You planned every dollar and every deduction and every compound interest calculation that made it structurally possible. But the moment itself belongs entirely to a woman who spent 25 years making sure you had a table to sit at, and who is now, for the first time, just standing in her own kitchen with nothing to fix. Across the street, a neighbor you've never met steps onto her porch and watches your mother through the window. She doesn't know the story. She doesn't know about the call center or the calculator or the pawn shop on Reyes Street. She just sees a woman alone in a new house, standing very still, looking at a tree, and she thinks, without knowing why, that she has never seen anyone look so much like someone who has finally been allowed to put something down.